All right. Go Twins. Welcome, everybody, to the October 11th, 2023 City of Edina Planning Commission meeting. We're very happy you're here. On behalf of the rest of the Planning Commission, we're grateful that you're tuning in remotely or here in person. Say it every time. I say that every time, so I'm saying that every time again. Your curiosity, your participation, and your feedback is vital to this process as we navigate change together here in Edina, specifically regarding the way in which people like to use their land. It's important to note that any and all feedback that's been sent to the city in a variety of means, whether email or through the city's engagement website, www.bettertogetheredina.org, it has made its way to us, and we commit to you that it has been reviewed and will be considered when we make our recommendations tonight and comments. So tonight we have only one public hearing. Maybe we'll close before midnight for a change. And we have one sketch plan as well. So the basic agenda, so you know what to expect, we'll call the meeting to order. There'll be a roll call. We'll approve the meeting agenda and the minutes from the prior meeting. Then we'll get into the community comment period, which is your chance to speak about an item not on tonight's agenda. That will be followed by the public hearing, which is your chance to speak about that item on tonight's agenda. Then we'll wrap up with reports and recommendations. As I mentioned, there's one sketch plan, so we'll review that. And then we close with chair and member comments and staff comments, and then adjournment. For those that are tuning in remotely, if you'd like to get ready for the public hearing, you can call the following number, 786-496-5601, and enter conference pin 290-3024 pound, and then press star 1 on your keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak. I'll go over that in a little more detail when we get closer to that time. And with that, we'll turn it over to calling the meeting to order, and then roll call.
Commissioner Felt.
Here.
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Padilla.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Schultz.
Here.
Commissioner Day.
Here.
Commissioner Bornstein.
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. And on we go to the approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Welcome a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Now to the approval of the, 2 meetings ago minutes, because it was very long, September 13th, 2023. If there's, I'd welcome a motion unless there's any proposed changes or modifications.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 13th. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. All right, as mentioned, now is the portion for tonight's community comment period. This is the chance for any resident to share concerns, excitement, issues about anything not on tonight's agenda. You, similarly to a public hearing, have 3 minutes to speak, so this is only for people in person. Please come up to a podium. When the light turns green, you got 3 minutes. Amber, you got 30 seconds. When it turns red, your time's up, and we'll let you know. Anyone here to speak for that? Sure? Going once, twice. Okay, we will move on from that agenda item. And now we're going to be into the public hearings. So what you can expect for this, typically staff provides a report to us based off of the applicant's proposal. With recommendations for approval or denial. The staff will provide a presentation to us. We will ask them questions. Then we give the applicant a chance to provide a presentation or speak about anything, then answer questions. And then we open it to the public hearing, which is, again, the chance for the community to speak about the matter. When we close that, it'll come back to the Planning Commission for us to deliberate, share commentary, and then we will make a recommendation for approval or denial on that matter. And with that, Planner Teague, take it away.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. I'm filling in for Addison this evening, the author of the report. But, this is a variance request for a single-family home located on Dawson Lane. It's located west of the Southdale District. It's on the intersection of Dawson Lane and Southdale Road. What the applicant is proposing to do is, currently they have a 2-stall garage with their home, and they'd like to get a 3rd stall garage. So it would be removal and build a new 3-car garage located right here. So the way Edina's ordinances are set up, for a corner lot, when a house is built, it's up to the property owner to determine what their front yard setback is when it's a corner lot. So when this house was built, it was determined that Dawson Lane would be the front yard setback and Southdale Road would be the side street setback. With the side street setback, you can go up to within 15 feet of the lot line. And with the front on Dawson, the front yard setback would be 35 feet. So that was how the home was located. So the rear yard setback opposite of the front became this area here. And a 25-foot setback is required. Had they selected Southdale Road as the front yard setback, the rear would have been this side lot line, where a 25-foot setback would be required, and this would be the side. So again, that determination was made back in the 50s when the home was built. A couple of renderings of what the garage will look like from the street and the back. So looking at the variance criteria, the 3 criteria. First, the variance would be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance. The intent of the ordinance is to provide, prevent overcrowding of buildings, adequate space separation between buildings, and to have a general consistency of setbacks within single-family homes. The separation of the addition here would be about 59 feet from the adjacent properties. You can kind of make it out here, but there's a shed on the adjacent property that provides some screening for the existing building here. So again, if this were a side yard setback, they could go to 10 feet. If they wanted to tear down the existing garage and build a detached garage, the required setback here would be 3 feet, so they could build even closer with a detached structure. Again, they do want to attach the garage. Consistency with the comprehensive plan. The use is allowed, obviously, in the low-density district. And we do have a provision in the comp plan that talks about what am I trying to say here? It's the maintaining an existing structure, building an addition, not tearing down and rebuilding. Encourage maintenance of existing buildings. So it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Then moving to our practical difficulties test. So practical difficulties means that the property owner proposes to use their property in a reasonable manner that's not permitted by the zoning ordinance. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances that are unique to the property and not created by the landowner. And if the variance is granted, it wouldn't alter the character of the neighborhood. So staff does believe that those 3 criteria are met. We believe that the proposed 3-car garage is reasonable. While this neighborhood is predominantly 2-car garages, there are 3-car garages in this neighborhood. It's mainly in houses that have been torn down and rebuilt. Typically, we see 3-car garages with those. But throughout Edina, 3-car garage is pretty standard. Again, it's reasonable in that they could build a detached garage 3 feet from that lot line, which would have a bigger impact on those adjacent properties. The site is unique in that it's a corner lot. We have many corner lots in this area, and a lot of them are non-conforming. The properties that are highlighted in red don't meet those setbacks, so they're existing non-conforming uses. In fact, the site that we're looking at, the existing home, has a 22-foot setback when 25-foot was the requirement. So this house is actually non-conforming as well. And we don't believe that it would impact the essential character of the neighborhood. It gives the appearance of a side yard setback off of Southdale Road, and there is that adequate separation between buildings. The applicant did provide a lot of support from their neighbors. Those letters were included in your packet, and we didn't receive any comments on Better Together. So with that, staff is recommending approval, subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in the staff report.
Thank you, Carrie, for the presentation. Any questions by the Planning Commission for staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll welcome the applicant an opportunity to provide a presentation or speak to the proposal. And just please state your full name and address.
I'm Josh Toma. I live at 6900 Dawson Lane, along with Don Eldridge. Hi. And this is Mike.
Mike Russell.
Mike, sorry. I always get confused. He's with Cecil Builders, but his last name is Russell. So we live together, and we'd like to thank you for your consideration, first of all. And also, we think it's somewhat arduous that we had to spend the extra time and money where we could have built a structure that would have been a blight on the property, and then we asked the commission to possibly review those existing codes so that in the future, if somebody wanted to build something close to the neighbor's yard like we could have, that it be considered that, and I know each property is unique, especially side lots, but that there be some more consideration in the codes for future planning. Anything else to say?
Well, I think you said it pretty well.
Yep,
Great, thanks you for your consideration.
yep, thank you.
Just hold on in case there's
Okay.
questions by the commissioner.
Sure.
Sorry.
Commissioners. Any questions? Yeah, Commissioner Padilla.
When I drove by the lot, I saw that there were two large trees. Those trees are on the adjacent property, not yours, is that
Correct.
correct? And they will remain undisturbed?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I too drove the neighborhood to kind of check out the houses adjacent, the houses around the block, the houses in the neighborhood, and saw a lot of one-story homes in the neighborhood. Did see one house, two-story house with a three-car garage, but I didn't, just looking at the drawings, I didn't see any houses where the garage was actually taller than the house. So I just wanted to ask you about that.
So the way that we're constructing the garage is that we built it a little bit taller for the simple fact that technically it's a two-car garage, but you can't fit two modern-day vehicles in it. And that with the size of modern SUVs and families, we felt like it would be appropriate to build the garage a little bit taller. We're also adding a 200-amp EV service to the garage so that future EVs, we can have two electrical level 2 charging stations in the garage as well.
Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Felt.
And then tell me a little bit about the driveway access to it. Are you going to change the curb cut at all?
The
or-
curb cut won't be changed, so in the yard itself, there'll be an expansion in the actual cement way, but the actual curb cut will stay the same.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Day.
I guess, out of curiosity, can you expound on the critique of the setback requirements and the arduous process that you mentioned?
Sure, we had to, number one, we had to pay for the variance, and Mike, do you want to speak to the additional costs?
Well, I think, yeah, you got to do a variance. It's kind of unique circumstance. Most cities I deal with, they will look at both, two front property lines and two side property lines. They don't usually distinguish on a corner lot, a rear property line, a side property line. It's pretty rare they do that. I could see them doing it for maybe addition work, because I can see if you have a living space there, you don't want people right on top of each other. But in this case, it's kind of a unique code because you can build a garage 3 foot from the property line detached, which would be more obtrusive to the neighbors. In this case, they want to do the same garage attached, they'll be 10 feet away from the property line. So just the idea that you got to do a variance at all is kind of unique when you can have a garage 3 feet off the line versus doing a nicer detached, the same exact garage attached, which will look way better for the neighborhood. So it would, I think what he's trying to say here is that maybe they could look at the code a little differently for attached garages on corner lots. Just because if you can do a three-car detached garage 3 foot, it doesn't make sense necessarily for someone to do a variance to do it 10 foot, I guess. So I think that's
Yeah,
part of
that's
the
what I was
issue.
getting at.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
As we mentioned, or as I mentioned, this is a public hearing, so now we'll turn it over to the community if they'd like to speak. So as mentioned before, if you're tuning in remotely and would like to speak, please dial 786-496-5601 and enter conference pin 290-3024 pound, and then press star 1 to get in the queue to speak. Is there anyone in the queue currently?
No.
Okay, good. So we'll give it a minute, and while we wait, we'll open it to people in person to provide a public hearing, or to provide testimony. So please come up to the podium, and you got 3 minutes to speak. Please state your full name and address.
My name is Jim Ripple, and I'm across the street from the property at 6825 South Dell Road. I think Don has done an excellent job on this, and quite frankly, probably I'll see it more than anybody in that neighborhood. I'd much rather have the attached garage than the detached garage. I think it just seems like a better plan all the way around. The one that's 3 feet from the property line versus what this is. She takes good care of the property. This will only improve it. So I have no issues, and I urge you to pass this.
Thank you.
Any questions for me or no?
We don't do that, sorry.
Okay.
I wish we could.
Thank you.
Very, very one way here. But we hear you and we'll speak to it. If anyone else is here in person and would like to speak, same deal, just come up to the podium. You got 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll turn it over to the virtual queue. Do we have anyone in line?
We do not tonight.
So it's been over a minute, so I think it's safe to welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Public hearing is closed. All right, we'll turn it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate. Any comments? Anyone like to share? Any other questions that come up?
I could kick things off here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think when we look at variances, we try to understand the reasonableness, uniqueness, and the neighborhood character. I think this is definitely reasonable. What we try to also look at too is, and I believe in your statement, you would have to park on the street instead of parking in your garage in some instances, or parking on the driveway. And from a safety perspective, I think as much residents that can get their vehicles into their into their garages secured, it's so much safer for the neighborhood. Modern cars, of course, is a big factor, and I looked at that 2-car garage, and it's really small for a 2-car garage. It could just fit 1 car, maybe a lawnmower on the side or something, but to fit 2 cars in there would be really tough. So I think that challenge is very real. The designs seem very reasonable to me. It still maintains the character of the neighborhood, which is interesting and is really well designed. And it's a corner lot, right? So it's very unique as well. And I think making the entrance come through on Dawson Lane, you have that 25-foot, I think, to that backyard line. If the entrance was on Southdale Road, then that would be considered a side lot space, right? So it's something that we would allow. And then on top of that, if you were to do a detached garage, you could go up to 3 feet. So I think having that 10-foot distance is a way better solution than having to build a separate detached garage that would be much closer to the fence line. Point taken regarding, revisiting some of these zoning ordinances, and I think feedback like this really help us think about it, and we could take it back and figure out when we could slot that into our work plan items. But overall, for me, this seems very reasonable. It is a unique situation, and it doesn't change the character of the neighborhood. So I'm in favor for granting this variance.
Thank you. Other comments, commissioners? Commissioner Pelt, on the spot.
No, I mean, I agree on the first two sections of the variance requirement, that this is a unique lot and the request is reasonable. I think that the reason most detached garages are about 525, 600 square feet, and their plates are at about 8 feet, and so they're pretty modest structures on a site. And I think a lot of that zoning came about, because when houses have garages on the main level, it takes up like half. It just makes the house so much larger than the house that was built in the past needs to be. So I think it's one of those things that's part of our history, and that we're working through necessarily. The third one, the character of the neighborhood, I did not see any other garages in the neighborhood that were taller than the house itself. And so for me, that does stand out, but I don't think enough for me to say anything about it. It's just a personal preference.
Thank you. Is there, at least in your analysis of that, is there a certain, it's all relative, right? So how far above is uncomfortable? Just even a foot, a few feet?
So most garage top of wall plates are at 8 foot, some are at 9 foot. This one was at 12 foot, so it was, like 4 feet taller than the normal one. And you can see on the side elevation, it's not as tall as the adjacent house, but it is taller than that house. So it will be a unique house in the neighborhood. But, there's lots of unique houses in a lot of these neighborhoods.
Sure.
So I don't think that's enough to stop it.
Any other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Day.
Not a whole lot to add. I guess Commissioner Smith summed it up really well, and pretty much agree with everything he said. And then, I hit on the point about the garage being a little taller, but I'd be more concerned if it was a detached garage that was significantly taller than the structure. Like, then it would definitely stand out a lot more to me. But to me, the way this wraps around, the way it's constructed, it just kind of looks like an additional part of the house, and it's not quite the, it doesn't stand out as much as, like I said, a detached garage would. So I think we hit on all 3 points pretty readily. Corner lots are always a challenge, and seems to be pretty straightforward to me.
I'll just offer one comment, maybe related to the process. I generally support the comments too, and I noticed the garage was taller and had light concerns, but not enough to overweigh. But just so you guys know, besides what we do here, which is a bi-monthly set of meetings to discuss and hash out matters like this, we do have a separate work plan each year where we do a lot of different work behind the scenes to kind of clean up old ordinances and things that might not stack up. So your feedback is really helpful. Every year we add a few things just like what you're describing to look at and potentially change. So sorry for going through the arduous process, but, that helps us make it better for others. So that feedback's important. If there isn't anything else, I'd welcome a motion.
Make a motion to approve a 14.6-foot variance from the rear yard setback as requested by the applicant, subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report.
A second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I guess all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck with your project.
Thank you so much.
Was that a cheer for your project, or did the Twins score a home run? Oh, no. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Moving to the next item on today's agenda is our reports and recommendations. This is a sketch plan review for 4444 and 4200 76th Street West. Planner Teague will present. Similar to the public hearing, there's going to be an exchange of questions, comments, but unlike the public hearing, this isn't the opportunity for residents to provide feedback. It's simply a time to listen and learn more about the project. And then as soon as this comes in for a formal application, then that 60-day window is triggered, and then there will be a public hearing. And hopefully comments and feedback will be incorporated into that. So with that, Planner Teague, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So this property is located in the Greater Southdale District. It's on 76th west of France, located here. It's two properties that we're looking at. To the east is a project called The Sound. It's an all-affordable housing project. Across the street is the future site of a new fire station that we went through recently. Site is guided office residential in our comprehensive plan. It's zoned PID, planned industrial district. The yellow area here you can see in purple with the Sound project that was rezoned to PUD, which is the tool that we've used for 100% affordable housing projects, where we can require in the code that the property needs to maintain its affordability over time. So what the applicant is proposing here would be to remove those two structures on the site and build a 6-story, 186-unit building on the west side of the property. Parking would be all hidden within the building. The second piece of it would be a 4-story, 65-unit building. Again, parking underneath, green space in the front. This drive that you see around is a requirement of our fire department. Here is a rendering, just a block diagram. You can see the Sound project to the east, and you can see the 4-story and 6-story building. So what this would require would be a rezoning to PUD. We could extend that existing PUD to the east to cover this site as well. So again, this PUD has been the tool that we've used for 100% affordable housing developments. Examples being the Sound right next door, the Amundsen Apartments in the 70th and Cahill area, and the 4040 project on 70th Street. So just to quickly show you a compliance table, you can see the requirements in the PUD to the east. Differences being with the proposal here is the setbacks a little bit closer on the north lot line from 80 feet to 40 feet. The side setbacks would differ. Again, there's a 4-story, 48-foot requirement both in the PID district and within the PUD. So again, this is a 6-story project. And you could notice it in that block diagram that the density is more on this site. The Sound is 35 units an acre, a little bit smaller building on a larger lot, and this is 63 units per acre, still within the density range within the comprehensive plan. And the floor area ratio, again, because of the massing of the building, would be larger than the Sound at 1.5, and the proposal here is 2.4. So some of the things to consider is the density, that FAR. This would be add 251 units of affordable housing to help us meet our affordable housing goals. With any formal application, a traffic and parking study would be required. Again, we talked about the height as an issue for discussion. Pedestrian connections. Given the large width of the drive aisles that were asked by the fire department, possibly these could be reduced in size, maybe some different textures, geogrid, something to that effect. Even with Mick Johnson did provide a memo for your review. He suggested, maybe even some of that space could be active playground, basketball court, something to that effect. So it could be used not just as a fire lane, but could be an active space for the residents of the building. They would be required to fill out our sustainability questionnaire. And we talked about the driveway widths being reduced. And so I will stop there. Those are some of the issues to discuss. The applicant is here for a presentation as well.
Any questions for Carrie? Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Director Teague. I just want to go back to the fire department requirement on the, accessing around the building. Could you just talk more about that and how that could potentially be a constraint on maybe how the building architecture is going to formally be developed?
Yeah, the idea is they like to get their trucks all the way around the building. This issue came up with the Finch project and the Fred over on 77th, and they came up with some creative ways so it's not all hard surface, but they can still get a fire truck across it. So I think that part can be worked out in design where potentially they can still get all the way around the building, but it's not a 26-foot wide path all the way around.
So just to add to that, I know right next door, the 4-story sound building, they don't have that same configuration where there's a pathway for the fire truck, but I'm assuming that the fire truck could still access any emergencies that might occur at the back of the building. So is the pathway to get around the building something that is a recommendation, or is something based on the size of this building has to be a requirement where you have to get a fire truck behind that building?
Yeah, from my understanding, I don't know the details of the fire code, but there is some flexibility that they can do alternative things they can still address the health, fire safety issues while at the same time not having to pave the entire area. So there's a lot of options out there. I think they're providing clearly how you could get around, but we can work with them on that with our fire department.
Okay, and just one more question here, and I'll pass it on. With a PUD, do we have to stay within 4 stories, or could you go above 4 stories?
You could go above the 4 stories, yeah. It would be a change to that PUD district to allow greater height.
Okay.
Currently, it's the 4 stories, 48 feet. So that's where part of the flexibility would be requested.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions for Carrie? All right. Thank you, Carrie. Might have more for you later. Welcome the applicant team here, and just introduce yourselves, who's all here, where you're from, and looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Commissioners and staff, Mike Hudson, Vice President with Ellis Black Development, address 1959 Sloan Place in St. Paul. Again, thank you for having us here today. We're excited to present this project. A little bit about the project team. ESG Architects and Laux Engineers are our partners in this project. Ellis Black Development is a relatively new company, started in April of 2020. Partnership between myself, my partner Willie Boulay, and Sterling Black, in partnership with Ellis Black Constructors, a local group who's been around since the 70s. Our goal is to develop high-quality, affordable housing projects in A markets. here are a few of our projects that we have currently under construction. Since starting the company in April of 2020, Canvas Apartments in Northeast Minneapolis was our first project to close. That was a 160-unit project with 23,000 square feet of production space. That project we completed in collaboration with Hennepin County, who issued the bonds. The Balsam on Broadway project was our second closing and currently under construction in St. Paul. That's 128 apartment homes, and we will have our future office in that space as well. The most recent project to close is the Preserve at Mustang Creek. That's in Round Rock, Texas, a northern suburb of Austin. 252 apartment homes there, 1 through 4 bedrooms. And I should note that all of these are 100% affordable. So as Mr. Teague pointed out, the way that our site is laid out is 2 separate buildings. The larger building here, the 6-story building, has parking enclosed in the building. So it's kind of a parking ramp that's wrapped by units. The nice thing about that is folks can, drive their cars straight up to their floor and exit onto their floor. When you have a lot of families living in these projects, you're juggling kids and groceries, it's great to just be able to go right to your floor and park there. We also have this smaller 4-story building here. The reason that we separated that, originally what we had shown staff was a larger building, but we couldn't accommodate the drive around the building for fire, and thought that also fire would want 2 entrances or exits here. It seems that one of the recommendations was potentially eliminating one of those, which we could be open to, and looking for feedback on that. Again, this is our proposed massing. They look a little plain at this stage. Obviously, we aren't showing our balconies here or the Class A materials that we'll have. As you can note in our other projects, we've done a lot of brick and stone and would want to do the same thing in this project. One of our goals is for folks on the street to not be able to tell if it's a market rate project or an affordable project. That's very important to us. We're long-term owners. We'll own for 15 plus years. So high quality materials are very important. We do stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, and all the amenities that you would typically see in a market rate. Again, thank you for your time, and I'm here for questions and would really appreciate your feedback.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Look around side to side. Any questions from commissioners?
Someone else.
I saw a nod all the way over there. You might as well start. Commissioner Pelt.
Can we go back to the site plan that you had, Director? That one has there's a site plan that the city had with the site, and it showed a few more adjacent buildings on it. I think it's...
This one?
The first one, second one, number 2. Yeah, that one. So I noticed when you come off France, there's a couple of buildings there, and the Sound is one of them, where the setback of the existing buildings, the Sound, the credit union, are all pretty consistent. And wanted to ask, because your building kind of moves a little closer to the street than that, so wanted to know a little bit about that and if that could be looked at.
Sure. I think we are, the larger building is consistent with the credit union, kind of lined up with it here. But yes, this 2-story or the 4-story building does come out a little bit further. So that is something we could look at. I mean, in this project, we've just been really focused on maximizing density in order to make the numbers work. Mm-hmm. As I'm sure you guys have seen or heard, housing projects in general are hard to make pencil right now, and affordable housing specifically with our capped rents, very difficult, especially in a great market like Edina, where land prices are high. Unfortunately, sellers don't give us a discount for our mission-based cause here. So that's one of our constraints, but that's certainly something that we can look at.
Okay. No, I really appreciate your willingness to be in this market. And I really appreciate your saying, make it look like a market rate apartment, right?
Absolutely.
Because everybody needs, a little dignity in order to live, and we need to be able to support families of whatever means. Okay, so when we're talking about families, I noticed you had a little bit of a play area back there, a pocket park. And when I was driving the neighborhood, all of those condominiums and the apartment buildings to the north of this are all 3 stories, and they all have nice setbacks with little berms, and the condominiums have a tennis court, and so there's a lot of green space. Right. So I was wondering about making this kind of blend in with some of those, having some of that green space up front and a nice setback and a place where people could gather.
Yes, absolutely. So the pocket park and then kind of the space in the front, obviously our landscape design is not very far at all at this point. Sure. So we would have to move that design forward. Another thing I should note, all of our projects we've built so far have an indoor play area as well as one of our amenities.
Okay.
We're we'll have the majority of the units will be 2 and 3 bedroom, so family oriented. So it's kind of like the McDonald's Playhouse kind of structure. Yeah. For our cold Minnesota winters. So there'll be multiple options, but certainly we will emphasize outdoor green space to the extent that we can.
Okay, because it would be lovely if it kind of blended in with some of those condominiums and apartment complexes. I mean, obviously they have mature trees, those are, some of those things take some time. Another question is this parking ramp. Are these level parking?
Yes, it's like podium.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And is that all 6 stories?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think if you go back to that one site plan again, number 2. If you look closely, I was looking on Google Maps today, it looks like there's a walk on the north side of whatever's in the medical building in the corner that comes around and comes actually by the Sound. So notice that was in the, all I have is a little piece of paper. Okay. From Google Maps. And you can see a little sidewalk behind there, and that comes around. It'd be lovely if that could kind of go through.
Okay.
Because once again, there's some green space with those apartments on the north side.
Yes, and definitely in our site plan, it's not fully developed how we will have sidewalks around the whole building as well.
Okay.
And on the front here. But yes, we could look at that as well.
Okay. I think that's it for me.
Maybe just moving down the line. Commissioner Miranda, you got any questions? Okay. Commissioner Padilla.
So have you designed any other buildings that look like this? It looks like the ones that you showed us had different design. Anything that's where you've got the parking in the middle?
No, we have not done those before in this market. Oftentimes, sites aren't big enough to accommodate that. It is a nice feature. There are some of these in Bloomington. We can give examples. And certainly in our next presentation, if we were to bring this forward again, we could give some examples of those here in this market. But oftentimes in more urban sites, you just don't have the land area to accommodate that.
And in Building 2, the parking is on the first floor, that's correct? So
there's a level of underground.
There's a level underground.
Correct.
And then you've got 4 stories of residences.
Correct.
And the residences, is there a breakdown that's different between Building 1 and Building 2? In
No,
terms of the sizes or anything?
They would both be generally the same, majority 2 and 3 bedroom, probably 80% 2 and 3 bedroom, and then 20% 1 bedroom.
And you're looking for TIF funding, is that correct?
That's correct.
A question, and maybe this might be for Director Teague. In the architect's memo, he talked about suggested pathway across France. And I assume that isn't something, if that's incorporated into the use of the TIF funds with the city at the helm of that design, not the developer.
That could be one of those public benefits that the city would pay for through that TIF, yes.
Okay, I guess I'll hold the rest of my comments. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith, any questions?
Sure.
All right.
Thanks again for the presentation. I'll try to keep it as questions. So I get this is just a high level, here's where we want to put it, what's some good feedback, so then we could lean into that architectural design. One comment that we certainly get in the city is residents don't want Soviet-style buildings. I know this is just a starting point, but it's not going to be the final. So things like the balcony that you mentioned, just the materials, you covered that. I think part of the Southdale design guidelines also talks about, fenestration, glass, and that's all going to be part of the design. And I think my main thought on this one is, the design and the look and feel would be really important, especially if TIF financing is part of the equation, because that's when we get to, really request from the developers to have a really nice building if the city is going to help support some of that development. Just a couple questions on the AMI ratios here. I think you pretty much covered only 20% 1 bedroom, 80% 2 to 3 bedroom. I know the AMI was a range from 30%, I want to say, to 80% roughly, right? So pretty much a wide range of different kinds of renters. How do you see that distribution in terms of how much units would be for this AMI level versus this AMI level? Is that something that you guys also figure out as well?
Yes, so we left that relatively open-ended at this point, and that's part of the feedback that we'd like to get through this process, through neighborhood meetings, which we had one last week that went well. Also feedback from City Council in terms of what the community is looking for. We have done projects. Our project in Austin is almost exclusively at 60%, so that's common. However, we have done projects in Northeast Minneapolis and St. Paul. Those are income averaging projects. So we have 30% units, and then the bulk of the units are at 60%. And then we have some units at 80%, and they all average to 60%. So we're open to that. We think all of those units are in high demand in the metro, but specifically in Edina, there would be such a advantage to the market rate here. The differential between even the 80% rent and what your market rate is here is several $100s. So we think that they would all lease up quickly and stay full and serve a great need. So that's something that we're open for feedback on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We've certainly received questions on when we say affordable housing, what does that mean exactly, right? And is 80% AMI affordable versus 30%? What is the city looking for? Is it fair to say that if there's more a higher AMI for the renters, the development costs or the TIF financing needs would be lower? So if you had like more residents in that 80% range, the cost to develop would be, the cost to finance the property or the project would be lower than if it was like more residents of the 30% AMI, for example?
Not necessarily, because we'll always average to 60%. So the dollars and cents kind of shake out the same.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Just around the design, things like landscaping. I know there's just a high-level model. You have trees around there, which is great. And I think the pocket park was discussed a little bit, and seeing what we could do with that. Anything that you've thought about that would be functional with like solar panels, EV, stuff of that nature?
Yes, we have done solar panels on all of our projects so far and would do that again here. Our St. Paul project is designed to LEED Silver standards, so that's something that we would look into as well. Oftentimes with city requirements, you already get 80% of the way there, so it just makes sense to push the envelope a little bit further and get those certifications. With part of our with our tax credits, MHFA requires us to build to a certain level of green, but certainly we will have EV charging stations available, as well as solar panels, which will, in most of these projects, they offset the bulk of the house electric meter, so the common area electric.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned that you're a newer company. You guys do a lot of the building, and I think in one of your building designs, it might have been the balsam. I forgot what the name was. There's like an office at the bottom.
Yes.
Do you also do management as well? Like, do you manage the properties, or do you just focus on building the properties?
We will use a third-party manager. In this case, it would be Roars Companies, who's local. They're out of Minnetonka. They would be our third-party manager.
Okay. Just one more question, and I'll let it continue down the pathway here. Parking is included in the rent.
Correct.
Some residents may not have vehicles, but they'll be paying for parking. As part of the future state, and maybe this is more for the management, but is it possible to even disaggregate the rent from the parking? Could you rent an apartment at a lower rate and not have to pay any extra for a parking spot if you don't have a vehicle?
I have not looked into that. Most projects charge for parking in addition to rent, most of the affordable projects. Here we could probably get, $150 a month in parking rent per stall if we wanted to go that route. We thought it was important to include the parking in the rent to encourage residents to park on the site, since there's not really other options nearby. In some other scenarios, there's ample street parking, but obviously that's not the case here. So we felt it was important to include that in rent to mitigate, any parking issues down the line.
But if you don't have a vehicle, and let's just say you're $150 away from affording a unit, then you're paying for a spot that you don't use.
You rent it to another tenant. You rent your empty spot to another tenant.
Is that okay? I'm just toying with the idea
Sure.
of someone who just has a bicycle, right?
There you go.
And he wants to live there, but he's just short a little bit. How could he still make it, he or she? I think you covered most of it. I have a few more, I think, but I'll let it continue on the path. Thanks again.
Thank you.
You got any questions?
So my fellow commissioners, we were kind of worried about the environment or kind of the green spaces that our communities would have. And would you guys be open to having maybe like green space on the roof in addition to the pocket park, to have that as another facet of the building?
Typically, those are too expensive for these projects to be able to support. Yeah.
Any other questions? Great question. Commissioner Day?
I guess I'm not sure if the developer will be able to answer this first one, so I should have asked this when Carrie was still up there. But TIF funding for this project, have we done TIF funding for the Sound, for Amundsen, for other affordable housing developments before? Okay. I wasn't aware of the history, so now I am.
Yeah, and the TIF is a decision of the city council, not the planning commission.
Okay. I guess so then talking about the economics of this, right? So I'm assuming the 6-story decision is very much economic based. With the project, I mean, if you went reduced down to 4 stories so that it matched the building next to it as well as the Sound, and kind of kept with the character of the neighborhood around it, a lot of 1-story buildings around there, would that make it not financially viable anymore? And then this is a multi-part question. If you didn't get TIF funding for this, would this also make it not financially viable for this to go forward?
Yes, so if we reduce the height and loss density, that would make it unfeasible for us at this point. And then in terms of TIF, obviously there's other funding sources that the city has or the county or other groups have. So I'm not going to say that if we don't get TIF, the project can't move forward, but we will need a significant amount of assistance, and most likely from the city level, yes.
Okay. That's it for me.
I don't think I have any questions. I'm good. Thanks.
All right. I just have a couple questions detail-wise. So just to confirm, the plan for the parking deck in the middle, that is no roof, open to the elements?
Correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned you were, open to removing the drive or loop around the building. If you were to do that, which will come in a comment from me later, I'm sure you've thought about it. How might you guys propose to shift things around and or other accommodations you could see with all that extra space?
Yeah, I think the answer is more green space. I think it's an interesting idea to have this, the loop available for fire access, but not always used for that. Certainly something that we could look into. And then potentially you'd have some sort of a turnaround on the northern end of the site. So I think the answer is more green space, but we haven't dug into that too much at this point.
Okay. I guess the other question I have is, oftentimes with a project like this, a lot of our focus is limited to the public realm, the piece of the project that connects to other projects, how it makes it feel like a community among buildings, et cetera. And that's what kind of speaks to the design experience guidelines and the Southdale design principles. But I think you've shared some things that are thoughtful for building a community within the building. So it's admirable. I mean, just the parking situation, just to have people park closer to where they live is cool, the indoor play things. Are there any other things that are at least noteworthy that you've taken from other projects or other ideas that you've brought to this that we're not seeing or you didn't mention that speak to kind of extra amenities or extra, community building within the structure or potentially the outdoor area?
Sure. So our units will have a full-size washer, dryer in unit, and they're quite spacious units as well. In terms of community amenities, typically we do a fitness, full fitness, as well as a yoga studio with on-demand classes that you can take, cycle and yoga, stuff like that. The children's area I mentioned, we'll also have our management, obviously we'll do community events, we'll have a community club room, and try to build that sense of community as best as we can. We'll have ample bike storage in our project in Northeast Minneapolis. We have one-to-one bike parking. I don't know if we'll be able to accommodate that here, but we'll do our best to provide as much as we can. That's all I can think of at the moment. Pet spa, we'll probably look to program a dog area or pet area just to keep the pet waste kind of contaminated in a certain spot. That's what I can think of off the top of my head.
So maybe aside from, the TIF, which is kind of out of our jurisdiction for this body, and, supporting this project ultimately, besides feedback as well, what else could we do to help you here? I mean, are you looking for specific feedback for kind of the design element? Is there anything in particular that you would like feedback for? Otherwise, we can keep our comments pretty general or specific, but just want to know what could help you most too.
Yeah, general feedback specifically as it relates to just kind of the layout of the site. Like I think I mentioned before, we had a single building and then decided to break it up. I think that was one of the suggestions we got from staff. So if that's the correct way to go, we limited the building on the right to 4 stories just to be mindful of the parking and to make sure that the folks in that building had ample parking. So yeah, we would appreciate any feedback, but specifically as it relates to the orientation of the site would be great.
Or I guess maybe my last question, just looking at one of the renderings that's kind of looking down from the side. Yeah, that one. Hey, wow, you're reading minds. It looks good from here because you see quite a bit of articulation. One just question I have is the east side of that 4-story building is about a 400-foot stretch of just one wall, Are there similar situations on other projects, or what have you done architecturally to kind of, temper that a little bit? Is it more landscaping at the ground level to kind of, tie the building in a little better and buffer that long wall?
Certainly landscaping, and then being creative with the materials that we're using. Obviously, we wouldn't do a long stretch of one material. That really accents the length. We would, ESG has been great to work with, and I know they've done a lot of work in the city of Edina. So we'd look to them to guide us on the best way to break that up architecturally from a material standpoint, certainly.
Okay, that's all I got for questions. Yeah, Commissioner Padilla.
Just one other question. Are you operating under the assumption that being across the street from a large firehouse will add appeal for renters, or is that a detriment?
I don't think it's a detriment. There could be some appeal there. It'll be great to see that redeveloped, and obviously the city has great plans for it. So we're looking forward to seeing that happen. But I don't think it's a detriment.
Okay, but you're aware of it.
Correct.
But it has nothing to do with your economic model in terms of how you
No.
derive rents or anything like that. Okay.
No.
Any other question? Yeah, Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned that your building in St. Paul, you have some office space or will have office space for your business there. Is there any thought to having office or retail or restaurant in this building or either of these buildings?
We didn't consider that. The economics for us, I don't know that we could make that work. It was important for us to put our office in one of our projects. We live and breathe the work that we do every day, and when lenders and investors come to visit us, we want them to experience, one of our projects. So that's why we put that there. But I don't think that this location, economically, retail is hard to get leased right now. So when we go to our lenders and investors, they probably won't underwrite that income. So financially, I don't think we could make that work.
Okay. And then, let's see. So you said the parking ramp is in the interior is the same height as the building, or the same number of stories, or no?
Yes. Well, I believe it's 5 stories, so the top level is kind of open.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So now you're meeting our parking requirements, which I find a little odd, because most places, new buildings don't want to meet that, and they don't really feel they have the need for that much parking. So is that pretty much that you're stuck with that much space, or is it something you feel you really need, or?
It's because we have so many 2 and 3 bedroom units that we know that some families will have more than one car. So we find it important. And then the other factor that I mentioned before, there's no street parking here. So this is our one opportunity to get this right. And we can't, oops, we don't have enough parking. There's really no other option for residents. So
How does this relate to your Minneapolis and St. Paul properties in terms of number of parking spots per?
this is more than what we're doing in Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Yeah, okay.
Those ones have more opportunities for street parking.
They near transit?
They are near transit, yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, this is the densest part of Edina, and it's getting denser all the time. And the E line won't come right to this area, but will come nearby. So we'll have BRT in the area. So I'd encourage you to think about whether you need all that parking or not, or whether, and I know I'll inflame some people, but have you considered adding a story of housing and keeping the parking the same?
We could certainly consider that, especially for the 4-story building. Yes, we could look into
Because
that.
I mean, this is a very, dense area and getting denser all the time. There's 20-story buildings nearby, so I think 6 or 7 stories is not a big deal here at all. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Maybe we could go around with just some comments, provide you some of that feedback you requested, and share a little more insight that we can have to offer. Maybe just go down the line again. Commissioner Felt? Or what?
Start from that side, maybe.
Yeah, we'll start on this side. We'll go reverse order. Commissioner Bornstein.
Yeah, I mean, generally supportive. Nice to see an effort to put affordable units here. Maybe just some high-level things to think about. Most of my comments kind of relate to everything outside the structure. So like the pedestrian experience, it'd be good to just kind of have someone articulate that a little bit better. I don't love the fire circulation path or whatever it's called and how big it is. I don't love that it wraps around the back of the building. I know that's not something that you're adamant about having, but there's like this tiny little sidewalk and it kind of stops. I only see it on the lower right portion of the site. It would be great if it was so big, people could actually walk around it on something that maybe had a tree between that thing and whatever was driving next to it. And then with the potential plans for there being a potential pedestrian connection, behind this site coming from France and moving east and west, a little bit of sketching out how this might tie into that, or at least be set up in a way where it could tie into it if that becomes a reality would be maybe good to see. If we could narrow the circulator, that would be nice, and maybe not have it go around the back of the building. It doesn't go around the back of the 4-story building to the right. And then I guess maybe just give a little thought to how the green space around the building can be like usable for the people who live there. If some of the concrete is made smaller and some of the pedestrian attention is dialed up a little bit, including maybe on the front. I don't know, what's this? I just kind of noticed this green patch in the front. Is that just grass?
Kind of the notch out in the middle?
The notch in the middle.
Yeah, currently don't have a well thought out plan for that, but certainly could be some sort of a park or garden type feature.
I don't know. Just if you got a lot of people living here on a denser site, the more they can kind of have little pockets of space to use around the site would be probably something people would appreciate, especially because, there's kind of some less some, I don't know what the right word is, just some less accessible uses, in this area still. So ways to soften up the living experience, but generally supportive. It would be good to see kind of another iteration come back with some more of those details fleshed out. But
thank you.
Yep.
It's still very early in the design stage, so it's hard to really pick apart or be too critical of what was been presented today, because I know there's a lot of work to be done so far, right? So as far as landscaping, you guys are still trying to figure out, how are you going to use that notch? How are some of these parks going to be situated and everything? So I don't need to nitpick too much on with the details in front of me, because I'm sure the next time you come in front of us, this will look exceedingly different. I would recommend, though, that you carefully study the PUD purpose and intent section of our code. All right, so that's Chapter 36, Article 4, Section 36-253. So the development that we just had approved, rezoning from PID to PUD right across the street. I remember early on in their development process, basically they had, more or less a box that we didn't care for as much. And I made the same recommendation at the time and said, look through these 9 points to what we're aiming to achieve from a PUD as kind of a give to get, and sort of this is what we're asking for in return for rezoning to this type. Think about all the ways that you can meet those requirements, right? And that's really just goes to what other people are going to comment around. That's the efficiency of the streets, the quality of the design, the utilization of the green space, et cetera, right? So just definitely make sure you touch on those points, and even a list of how you meet those requirements when next time you come forward with a sketch is always very helpful. I don't have many other criticisms. I don't like the 6-story, but it's not a deal breaker for me. I think it sticks out a little bit, but as Commissioner Miranda said, the area is getting more dense day in and day out, and it's not jarring compared to France Avenue and the development across the streets. I know a sticking point in our community is TIF funding, so I've already seen pushback on early discussions around this proposal on the city, giving a lot of our developers TIF funding. It's probably required here, and I know the financials, if the TIF funding portion, more funding from the state or whatever, if that can allow for any kind of, I know it's hard, but, like Commissioner Miranda said, a restaurant, some additional utility of the space, right? Because what I worry about is that we get too many residences bound together, and now you don't get a 15-minute city when everything's 30 minutes away, right? When all your restaurants and places you want to go are now further outside the residential areas because we've just made blocks of apartments. So if we can find a way, I know it's difficult, but it would be nice. So.
I guess I was kind of wondering, why was there a difference between the 6-story for that larger building compared to the 4-story on that other one?
We were just trying to be mindful of the parking constraints in the 4-story building, since it's a narrow building. It's less efficient on parking. We just have the one level of underground parking. Sometimes people do 2. That's very expensive. We wouldn't be able to afford to do that. So it was really just balancing out the parking metrics there.
Yeah, and kind of going on the cars and stuff, with an increased amount of cars going in and out of this big fire lane almost. Would that disrupt that pedestrian flow? Is there any way that we can modify that to be able to allow for pedestrian traffic through that area?
Through the area on the front?
Yeah, through that front sidewalk.
We could look at, traffic control measures on our site, and certainly the expectation, our management would be keeping a watchful eye, making sure that people are driving safely. But, we can look at speed bumps and stuff like that, so people are slowing down before they get to the street, certainly.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, overall, when someone proposes to take on that challenge of affordable housing, that's a huge deal, right? And we really like that because we have certain goals that we want to hit as a city. This location definitely is a location of high density. There's affordable housing right next door. So I think this location actually works really well for that. At the same time, we certainly want to push the envelope and have an architectural design approach as well. So I know, again, this is a very basic design drawing. Your other properties look really nice with all the different style of material, the balcony, the glass, those kind of things. This building would be definitely 2 stories higher than most buildings in the area. So this is a statement building, I would say, just because of the height, right? You could go up to the top floor and you could see all across Edina. I think that's meaningful and that's valuable. And it's also going to be juxtaposed to a fire station that's going to have some really interesting design elements as well. So not that you're competing to see who's the best looking building, but you're going to have a building competing on that other side of the street too. So to comment, to follow some of the comments that you heard already, the design guidelines, the PUD requirements, those kind of things would be really valuable. Landscaping, the design, you talked about solar panels, balcony, fenestration, those kind of finer details I think would be really great to see. The pathway around the building, and I wish I was an architect in maybe my future life or something, but I really wish I could come with some new innovative thing that I could say, you know what, shift this massing to here, push it back this way. But anything I could think about was like a step-up approach. I've seen some buildings where it's lower in the front and it kind of steps up. That might be an interesting feature or interesting idea. Some way to step up from the lower levels around to a tall building, right? That might be a nice gradual transition I could think about. But again, I'm not that creative. And so I'll lean on you guys to be the creative ones. But, as much as we could support it, we certainly would. I think the intent is good. You have some experience doing this. Clearly, you've done this kind of project before. This location is a pretty solid spot to do it. So I think next time we come around, just having some of those design elements incorporated would be a real nice thing for us to really react to and look at. So thanks again for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Padilla.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is innovative. I think this is what the city of Edina needs. I think it's imperative that we build more affordable housing. I think this is a good place. I think this appears to be initially, well designed. So I would, based upon the little that you've shown us and what you're telling us, I would probably be okay with the change to PUD. The 2 recommendations, the kind of broad recommendations that I would have for you would be to keep apprised kind of what's going on in the neighborhood, because the neighborhood is changing. I would say fairly rapidly in terms of what's getting approved and what isn't, and how that fits in the context within the comprehensive plan and things like that. So again, make yourself aware of that, and to that point, kind of be careful. We will come back with a lot of questions, so make judicious use of your green spaces, your sidewalks, your bike paths, all the public areas. I would say make very judicious use of your public areas. We're all aware that you have very limited space. We want to do the most of it. We know you have an economic model that it has to fit. So oftentimes it's the way things look, some external incremental changes that can really help a lot. But I think it's a great project, and thank you.
Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah. Sound foreboding. I love affordable housing here near transit, and I'm just a little bit concerned that the Southdale district and this street in particular, seems to be becoming a concentration of affordable housing with affordable housing next door. I want to make sure that affordable housing is distributed throughout the city, and it's not just and it's not even poor people, right? It's like normal people, live here, and this is the only place they can live in Edina. So I'm not against the project, but I just want to make sure that, the city doesn't look towards, just making this a concentrated area of affordable housing or something. I think that would be a mistake. But it is a great place for it. The E line is going to be, not far from here. So I think it's a great idea. Along that line, you were talking about mix of income, and I think the mix of 30, 60, and 80%, I think is a great idea because, again, even within the project, you're getting a mix of incomes, and everyone's not like at the exact same level. I think that diversity is good for a city. The sidewalk in front seems to be closer to the street, if I'm reading that correctly, than the housing next door, and I think it would be good to have it the same setback from the street. I think it would be more comfortable. Hopefully wide enough for a bicycle to get on there too, since the city doesn't seem terribly interested in creating protected bike lanes. So the Southdale District guidelines for the area, as Mick Johnson mentioned, call for some sort of street or bikeway or something behind this building, which would require the input of the city and contributions from each of the developments here. I would encourage you to leave space, whether it's part of that fire department space or not, in the back, so that something like that could be built in the future, because I think that would be, or maybe it's something the city would negotiate for TIF funding or something, because I think that would be a really important thing to have, is to have, separate these blocks, which is part of the whole Southdale plan, is making these blocks not so monotonous to get around, and be a really nice place to get through here. Because clearly this whole area is redeveloping. Let's see. I am concerned about the fire department requirement for the drive going around. It sounds like that's not. It doesn't have to be, concrete and as wide as a street or whatever. So anything you could do. We talk a lot about moonroofs, in this planning commission, and this would be like the ideal place to have it, where it's like, generally cars aren't allowed there, but a fire truck could get through if it needs to, that sort of thing. So make it so that things could get through, but they're not really recommended there. And it would be a place for, instead of having a pocket park, you could have, a lot more diverse area for kids and families to play, or seniors to sit and play cards or something. So I would encourage that. Let's see. I'm okay with as long as it's not a fire hazard or something, reducing the parking ramp entrances to just one, as Mick suggested. I think that's a good idea. But again, I'd defer to the fire department for that. The thing is, it would make more. I kind of push back against green space in suburban areas, because it's generally not usable space. A lot of the space in the front, I think, would be pretty much not really usable. But between the buildings, as Mick said, I think that space is much more usable. It feels more comfortable. It feels like you live there. So I think having as many trees and places to sit, benches, that sort of thing, would make it more a nicer place to be. And I guess that's about it. Like I said, the parking, I think it's overparked, and I think, making renters, as Commissioner, I think Smith mentioned, making renters, pay for parking, even if, they're a one-car family or something. One person takes the bus or walks to work or whatever, since there's a lot of jobs in the area. It'd be nice to not have it quite so overparked. I think it really is overparked. So, all right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fell.
Okay. So I brought up the condominiums to the north before, and a lot of those are 3 stories. There's a apartment unit to the west that's like 3.5 stories. And so I'm wondering, Fred Richards is a block south and a block west, and that's 7 stories. I think a lot of the buildings to the south of this are going to be redeveloped. So I'm wondering about kind of transitioning between the 3-story condominiums to the north, and probably what's going to be developed more intensely to the south. So I feel like, like a 3-story to a 4-story is a general transition, 3-story to 5, might be a little less general, but the 3 stories to 6. So I'm wondering even about kind of stepping the buildings like front to back or something. The 4-story is adjacent to the 4-story, so that doesn't bother me as much in the 3-story to a 4-story building, but it's the 3 to a 6 on the back that I wonder if you can kind of think through, because I think that might be something that the neighborhood kind of thinks of. I'm kind of interested in this open parking area, because if it is overparked, and it actually, when I'm looking at the plan, it looks like both sides are sloped and not a flat area. But boy, when my daughter was young and we were kind of really pushed for time, sometimes I would just put her in the car and go to the top of the ramp at 4th of July rather than go down to Rossland Park. And we had a great time on lawn chairs. So I think there's some opportunities. I know the 6th level, the 6th floor is just a floor. There's no...
Right.
That's why you're talking about. But if it was kind of reduced, you would have a good view of a lot of the 4th of July fireworks, and it can be double as outdoor space. I mean, you don't want the cars and the children to mix, but if it's over park, you don't paint one section of it and you get a playground up there. I would consider keeping the setback similar to the buildings to the east, and I agree with both Commissioner Bornstein and Miranda about bringing that walk back and making it as wide as possible so people can stroll on it and ride their bikes on it. Breaking up these super blocks, that's a big one, these 400-foot long buildings. And I know ESG does a good job, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they bring to us. I'm wondering if fire trucks need a curb cut. It's the same thing, if a fire truck doesn't need a curb cut and it doesn't look quite like a drive and it can look like some green space, that would be nice for that lane going around there. I do, when it gets to be 400 feet, I mean, their hoses don't go that far, I know they're concerned, and rightly so. And I know that TIF funding isn't our thing, but the TIF funding is for public, is for things in the project that are for the public. And therefore, we do get to kind of talk about some of those public things. And and I'm going to ditto about the bikes, because there is the bike path at Fred Richards, which is relatively close by. So if there's a way to kind of help support that, it would be good. And I think that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, we got a few comments left over still. Yeah, really appreciate the presentation and the comments by fellow commissioners. I think everything's well stated, very thoughtful. I'm just going to echo a few and maybe add to it a little bit. So it was mentioned like the location of this project and this particular use is very good. So while there's affordable housing next door, this is a great spot to have it in our city. It's a prime location for a number of reasons. So thank you for choosing Edina to develop this in. On the note of the location, I mean, the future fire station will be across the street. So I think that ought to come into play about necessitating a need for a driveway all the way around the building. And I know if that was part of your plan, the fire department will make sure that that's at least 26 feet. But not every building has a drive around it. I mean, there's plenty of ones that are up against a freeway or by a park or by a creek, and you only can access 3 sides of the building or 2. So I'd encourage eliminating that left and back driveway altogether, kind of in line with Mick Johnson's comments, shifting everything to the west a bit, and maybe opening up that central kind of spine a little bit more. And so then just thinking of the vehicular experience, which isn't our primary exciting focus, but if you're coming in that entrance and there's just one from 76th Street, that experience seems to make sense where you kind of have, is that parallel parking spots to both lobbies or drop-off spots, right?
Yes.
Okay, and maybe short-term parking or something for someone.
For visitors, yeah.
For visitors. So then as you get back and you access the building to the left, maybe one thought is you access the building to the right a little farther and have the ramp come back to the south, and maybe that turn shares the loop, like the roundabout, the turnaround, so you don't have to go to the back of the building to turn around, but you turn around before that juts out. So then you open up that whole backside to just a lot of green space, and yes, some of it might not need to be programmed yet, but just keeping in mind of the future to have an ample corridor for a bike path. And then if that happens, probably you guys as managers, owners of this building, you'd want to invest more back there, but you could have a bigger park, a bigger, a field for kids to play in. I mean, you're talking at least 40 feet wide. There's a lot of spots to program for families to use it and just play. So even just lawn. So kind of to that pedestrian experience too, I guess, the front part of the building, there's that nice little opening that faces south between the lobby and the other part. So that gets a lot of good sun. I mean, to Commissioner Miranda's point and others, unless there's a use to it, just an empty lawn doesn't make sense. So maybe it's, a garden or a gardening spot for the community, since it'll get a good amount of sun in there, something pleasant to look at. And then if you do shift things and kind of squeeze the setbacks on the side, but not too much, so instead of 10 feet, maybe it's 20 feet on each side, you could have a nice almost figure-8 loop around the building, or a full loop for people to walk. That's nice. I mean, people that live in these buildings tend to like just walking around their building or their site, and if they're close to the Fred or can get on this future bike trail, having access all around the building would be very important just to walk. Commissioner Felt mentioned the parking ramp as another use that came to mind too. My wife was helping program like a drive-in movie up on the top of a parking ramp before, so if this is set back and you don't need to build maybe the 5th level or 6th level of parking, you could have, you're going to have big solid walls, so you could use it in different ways where, unlike a green roof, maybe you do have, a rooftop patio for people and it's kind of enclosed, and you dress it up a little better. Maybe the ramps turn so the top of it is at the north side so it gets good sun exposure. Those kind of things, because that'd be the top of the ramp. Or alternatively, you could do speed ramps going up and keep each floor plate, flat, which ought to be cheaper to build. The design of the building to the east, I mentioned it, I just feel like a 400-foot long wall is going to look really long even if you put different materials. So even a subtle articulation in the center of it, like you did on the other side, maybe not that wide, but maybe it steps in for 50 feet, but only a few feet back.
Sure.
Just something that's going to look like a really, really long wall. So, and then what was mentioned by Commissioner Miranda was different uses. I know you mentioned different amenities inside the building, and Commissioner Day mentioned it too, just of, for a PUD, what can you help accomplish? And if it's not other uses, even if you had like office space for residents to use, allow some of that 15-minute city, like maybe you don't have to go so far to eat, but you can still work and live in the same place or have that opportunity. So I think some other alternative amenities could help speak to that alternate use instead of confining people into their unit, which people probably won't have an office in these necessarily.
Yes, that's one I missed. Thanks for reminding me of that one. We do have work from home suites available and included in rent, as well as shared conference rooms and stuff like that. So
great.
We will have that as well.
Okay, sweet, nice. And then lastly, just keeping in mind of the future, as Commissioner Bornstein led, like a lot of our comments are going to be to the outside, the public realm. How does this touch other buildings? How does it respond to the future? When the building to the east was built, and we had our comments for that, and they came back and changed things. We didn't know what would happen to this site, so we don't know what's going to happen next door or behind as well. So I think eliminating those drives and offering more green space to respect whoever is next door in the future also is a little nicer than a road. And if it provides enough buffer for, a row of trees going down each of the east and west borders that help, with the pedestrian experience around the building, walking would be nicer. So I'd just encourage you to, again, study the PUD conditions and look through mixed comments, because they speak to kind of the design experience guidelines that we're hoping to guide you toward too. But that's all I got for comments, and appreciate your time. Any other comments or questions, you guys? Yeah, Commissioner Felt.
We're talking about that front little courtyard that isn't programmed right now, and I kept wanting to flip the lobby and making a larger court between the two lobbies. Either that or put a pickleball court in that. In there.
We hear they're working on developing a quieter pickleball, so hopefully that comes out soon to respect the residents when they're trying to sleep too.
Really appreciate it. I think that is it.
Thank you.
Good luck with the rest of the comments with City Council, and look forward to seeing how you take and incorporate the feedback.
Thanks so much.
Best of luck to you guys.
And thanks to staff. They've been great to work with and guide us through this process, so thank you all.
All right, thank you guys. Awesome. Appreciate it. All right, that concludes our reports and recommendations for tonight. Oh my goodness. Are we ahead of schedule? Wow, that's never happened. I know. It's good. No. So we have chair and member comments. I know tonight Commissioner Smith is going to share some stuff about the ADUs.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair Bennett. So I think the last time we met, I said that our meeting with the residents was last week, but it was actually this week. It was actually yesterday. So we had a meeting at 11 a.m. and then another meeting at 6:30 p.m. Here's where we got, I think the first meeting we had maybe 7 people. The second meeting we had roughly the same number of residents, just getting that additional feedback on their thoughts. And it's really positive. We had some really constructive feedback on the look and feel. There were certainly some concerns around density, parking, but we hopefully addressed some of that in the first meeting that we had in a day. The second work session, that group was very positive about ADUs and wanted us to take the approach of make it as easy as possible for folks to build it versus making it restrictive. So in 2 weeks' time, on the 25th, in our work plan session, around 5 or 5:30, is when myself and Addison Lewis are going to walk you through the survey results summarize some of the feedback and comments from residents, and hopefully as well have like a draft ordinance that it's been very, very in a rough format, but you guys could start asking a lot of questions and going through it and question us on like why we wanted certain things in there. So it's certainly moving along, and more to come on the 25th. Thanks, Jimmy.
Awesome. One thing I can share quick is we had the work session with City Council last week where we shared our proposed work plan. And it was a jam-packed session. Everyone had originally 7 minutes to speak but by the time it got to us, we had 0. So we kind of had to rush through that. But as sensed and I guess prefaced by that meeting, we knew that the City Council would likely recommend that the small area plan creation gets added to our work plan, and that's very likely. I think what happens now is staff has maybe 2-3 weeks to just gather it all up, and then you're presenting it to the City Council. Is it during a meeting?
The city manager presents at a work session.
At a work session.
Yep.
So I guess some of the feedback kind of went in order of maybe importance and newness. We had a couple things of feedback that we have a lot of things on our list, which we know. But as mentioned, a couple of them are just placeholders really for direction from the City Council. And if they are to add this small area plan to our work plan, we're going to likely have to lose something on ours. So my goal between now and when do you need stuff, Carrie, for that? Couple weeks?
Yeah, probably the sooner the better to get in front of the city manager.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have the meeting on the 25th, so maybe we can incorporate a little of that into our work session. Maybe not.
Ideally, we should probably get something to them next week.
Next week, okay. So I took a stab already at kind of prioritizing that list, but I'd welcome other feedback we can kind of share through email, I'm sure. One of the ideas was a couple of those parking lot items like the Cahill District Plan next steps, is that can just be removed from our work plan and it's just sitting in our parking lot to wait for direction, because otherwise if nothing happens with that, we're not really doing any work on it potentially this next year. And we might touch on it when we do the areas of potential change work item. So some of the other feedback was around the areas of potential change and small area plans. Member Pierce shared maybe because we're on the heels of the district plan not being approved, maybe it's not really, we follow the same exact small area plan process. And I know Commissioner Miranda, you brought it up, like a lot of these have the same foundation and it's a lot of the same work. So maybe we're changing that. It's like building the plane while flying in it. We're likely going to have to be working in parallel with a small area plan creation as well as looking at these potential areas of change. And some of that might even be, how do we adapt the small area plan to something that's more meaningful and maybe more impactful, something you could execute upon. I think that was one of the comments from the district plan too. Like, what are the next steps? How can we actually make change? And they didn't see it as something bold enough. But otherwise, it was favorable, but comments were short. Did I miss anything, Carrie?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, they did ask to prioritize our list to make it easier for them. So that would be the thing to work on here in the next week or so.
Any comments people have from just that short thing? If any of that makes sense. I know you shared something when we were talking about the work plan creation about small area plans in general, and I think that resonated with a couple of council members. So I don't know if you've thought about it any further. No.
I was waiting for feedback.
Yeah. Okay. What one?
Pretty
So that's
confident that the looking at small area plans stays on this year.
Yeah. Anything else, anyone? All right, Carrie?
Yeah, just a quick update on the fire station was approved by the council at their last meeting, and they held public hearings for the Putt Shack and the Minnesota Made Hockey, and they'll make the decision on those two projects next week. That's it.
Could I ask a quick question on the fire station, Director Teague? I know we were talking about the PID to include a fire station as an acceptable use. Was that approved, or?
It was.
It was approved. So does that mean that any design for a fire station is going to be acceptable? So if they wanted to go certain height, certain dimensions, once it's considered part of a fire station design, that will be approved in a PID district?
That, yeah, public uses like fire stations are allowed in the PID district. Correct. It's still subject to site plan review and our usual going through the process, but public buildings are now an allowed use within that district.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? You got something, Commissioner Day?
Sorry, this will be quick, but I just thought of it and wrote this down around the variance discussion and the comment about the arduous process and nonsensical requirements and whatnot. And, you know, to me, what made the least amount of sense was the fact that they could build a garage 3 feet away from the lot line and we wouldn't have any control over what that garage looked like. And as far as adding like additional language around the zoning, I mean, I think there should be additional clarification on, you know, height, area, percent non-permeable surface, right? Because like when I think of having a garage close to your lot line, or like really what that I think that ordinance is about is like a shed or a greenhouse and stuff like that, not building a massive 4-car garage 3 feet away from your lot line and there's nothing we can do about it. Right, so that kind of scares me a little bit that they basically, as I was reading through the proposal, like, well, if we want to put it detached, we can put it 3 feet from our lot line and we can basically do whatever we want, you know? It's like, yeah, I'm saying we should add like additional clarification to like, you know, make sure that we don't have these monstrosities on the edges of lot lines simply because they are a garage and their function.
Well, there are 25% coverage allowed on a lot, and that includes the house and any outbuildings. The only thing that
I understand, but I'm saying
Yeah.
like if your lot is massive and your house only takes up 10%, you could put a really, really big garage next to your neighbor's lot and take all their sunlight away from their backyard and stuff like that, right? It's not really a lot preventing that at the moment.
you might not get as good a return.
They might not
fine.
care.
Yeah, and individual tastes. And yes, it was arduous for him, but that was a somewhat, that comment, I think, was, there are a lot of people that go through this process that understand what we do, and that some sites are unique, and this does happen, and they don't complain as much.
Yeah, no, I'm not bothered by him complaining. People complain all the time to us. That's fine. It's more, again, I was just talking about the fact that it seems to be a very open or way that the ordinance is written right now. And like I said, like he could just, if he wanted to, he could just build a garage 3 feet from his lot line, and there's not very much restriction on that. That's all I was talking about.
Yes. Oh, no, I mean, yeah, it wasn't a very nice looking garage. It was ugly. It was huge, it was ugly.
We're on tape.
What? No. Just
So-
subjectively, though, I'm just saying, like, we have
Yeah.
these subjectives, but there's nothing you can do about it.
No.
Because it allows it, maybe there is a more focused way to draft some of these things to ensure that what does get built just maybe looks a little bit better. I mean, it was, like you said, it was like so tall. It was so much taller than the house. But we weren't being asked to weigh in on that, so.
No, no. And this is America. You don't need a contractor to build a residence. You can be just a homeowner and build a residence, and you can build whatever residence you want, and you can build it all by yourself. It doesn't have to meet Edina, and it doesn't have to meet country club standards either, so I think it's fine. I do want to comment, I do appreciate Addison's finding those two, the one document about variances, and the other one, I can't remember. I thought that was nice. And Addison did mention that he's going to look for some other small area guidelines that might be a little bit more concise as templates for us, which I
Great.
appreciate his work or willingness to work on that.
I was going to add and clarify to your comment, too, about the arduous process. Some of it was the lack of familiarity with the builder, because other cities have rear, front, and side yard setbacks and very similar process. So, like, I think someone walks into a process expecting that there's not going to be much based off of, like, how they were informed. But how Edina does that is pretty standard around the metro.
Yes. That said, he did make a comment about how other cities, when you're a corner lot and you need front setbacks on two sides, cities interpret that the other two are just sides and there's no rear. It's two sides, two fronts. So he was right in that. Yeah. Some cities do interpret it that way.
I mean, maybe that is something we add to the parking lot for next year. I mean, seriously, especially if you can add a detached. I thought it was 5 feet. Where was the 3 feet? Is it really 3 feet?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
Well, that includes the eave. The eave.
I mean, that is, like, I know someone wanted to build a shed and it was like 3 feet. I didn't think that it included a detached garage.
Yeah. We don't see too many detached garages.
I was going to say,
built.
yeah. I mean, we don't see it, right? I mean, and who's going to build a 3-car detached garage, right? Nobody. I mean, it's going to be attached to your house. So I just think it's a moot point. But
I have one. I didn't build it.
Right, they're existing, but
yeah, and
our
when they are,
garage is detached. We have a 2-car detached garage, and it's way in the back. And it is actually very close. It is very close to the lot, and it's probably 5 feet away. But I mean, it's
it's these corner lots that are difficult, where it's so exposed, and
Were you just telling me
typically
you wanted to tear
they're
it
in the
down
rear.
and build it up bigger? Is it you wanted a 4-car detached? Yeah, okay.
4-story garage.
That's right.
And actually, this reminds me a couple of things I want to mention. One, we have the parking committee, and we had a meeting scheduled, but a lot of people couldn't make it, so we ended up canceling it, and we're trying to reschedule it. And then one thing I'd like to point out, because I made a comment about the city not building protected bikeways, is that a couple of years ago, we approved a apartment building on Valley View near Wooddale on the southeast corner. And it's built now, and I had a concern that I wanted to make it conditional on the fact that the city would start to put in, or the developer would start to put in, a protected bikeway that would eventually go the whole length of the street. And I got pushed back, and my concern was that, a painted bikeway, people are just going to do whatever, and that delivery trucks would park there and everything. What I hadn't expected, though, was that I drove by there the other day, and a lawn service place was parked in the bikeway. And so you can have all the signs you want, you can have all the paint you want, but unless the bikeway is protected, people are going to park there. And it could be delivery trucks, it could be yard services, and it was for the building next door, the apartment building next door. So, I mean, if we don't have protected bikeways, then signs do nothing, so.
Yeah, point taken. I know one of the council members shared some statistics too about, we had a recent pedestrian death, a young girl. And just, the design of streets, but also the speed people are going. Like, it's only like 17% of people might die or have a serious injury when cars are going 20, but it's up to like 80% if you're going 40. And a lot of that isn't just by the signs. You can't just tell people to drive slower. It's the design of the street. The narrower it is, the more obstacles and other visual interruptions, the slower you drive. So it really is design, not signs, and communication. So it's a good point, and one we shouldn't lose sight of. And anyways, to figure out sure.
Just to echo it, I mean, people don't use the bike lanes if they're not protected. They're there, and then they become a good example is Wooddale. St. Louis Park issue, but everybody got very upset about Wooddale. They're going to take maybe 1 or 2 trees down and eliminate a couple parking spaces, which was a little bit ridiculous, but they wanted to put bike lanes in, and they put in bike lanes on both sides. No one uses them because they're not protected, and people drive right down the middle of them. So both of your problems are and it would be a great place to connect on a bike. You just don't feel safe doing it. So echoing all those comments, there's so many opportunities in Edina to make better protected bike connections. So hopefully we can figure out how to do it.
Well, then on that note, I might as well mention the city redid our street. Well, it's been our neighborhood, and the streets to the side of us haven't been finished and everything. But anyway, it's been ongoing. They paved our street. They finished that last year. So this year they've been doing the landscaping and whatnot on the edges of on the boulevard and whatnot, and putting up final signage. And so our street is I was on the bike and ped plan. That was the first thing I did on the Transportation Commission. And in that plan, our street is a bikeway. And what the city determines a bikeway to be is that they put up signs that say share the road. So that's our bikeway. So, I mean, in terms of making people feel safer, it's not really doing anything. So, and we live, we're just at the top of the hill, and there's a steep hill there with really bad visibility, and it's just, there's a tear down across the street, and the trucks park in front of it. Our street is only wide enough for parking on one side. So it's no parking on that side of the street, but they all park there. So then people zoom up and down the street because there's a school at the bottom of the street and a park at the bottom of the street. And I'm afraid someone in our neighborhood, is going to get hurt there. So.
And Julie Risser brought up at the last city council meeting that the third Sunday in November is Victims of Vehicular Accidents Remembrance Day.
Well, I'll add that, and now we're talking about personal experiences around our communities. I'll add that I had the traffic study done in my neighborhood several months ago because I'm right across from the high school, right? And so there's lots of people that use that as a convenient way to get around school traffic and barrel through there extremely fast, like every day after school's over and as soon as, when school's starting in the morning. People come flying through, and there's a blind corner because the hill is built up on Chapel Lane where I'm at, and there's no traffic control, there's no stop sign, even though it's a 3-way intersection. And at the open streets, the mayor stopped by, and I was going to ask him about it, mention it, and other residents actually brought it up first before I did. And I said, well, I actually had them come out and do a traffic study. People were very concerned. There was a kid who mentioned he almost got hit on his bike. And so they came, they did the study, and it took 4 months before I heard back. And then they said, well, no, actually, we don't see any concern with the neighborhood. Sorry, too bad. And that's it. Case closed. No traffic controls, no signage, nothing. Speed bumps. Speed bumps are a different thing with plows and stuff, but yeah, I mean, we talk about bike lanes and stuff like that, but this is there's no bike lane, there's no sidewalk, there's nothing, there's no yield sign, we don't get. So it's kind of nuts, but I thought it was pretty eye-opening that we had brought it up and multiple people had mentioned it, and we did a study. And I mean, just yesterday I saw there was a kid that drove through my neighborhood probably going at least 45 miles an hour. It was nuts. So, yeah, it's a problem we need to address.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. You got something else? Well, I think they already shared theirs, so we just went back to ours. I'd welcome a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.